Hello, and welcome back to Media Connexus Impression Studio. Today we're going to talk about the Presentation Acts toolbar and laying out your presentation in the editing window. If you haven't done so already, you might want to watch the Tell Your Story tutorial before watching this one. Okay, an act is simply a group of scenes. You can think of acts as a way to group related messages in your presentation. You can then use these groups of related messages to quickly and easily build and/or rearrange your presentation. For example, you may have several different products, but only a few are important to a particular client, while another client may want to see different products. If you author individual acts for each product, you can quickly and easily tailor your presentation for different clients. The Presentation Acts toolbar, in conjunction with Edit Layout Mode, will help you accomplish this. The Presentation Acts toolbar is a graphical listing of all the acts in your presentation. The first three scenes of each act are displayed, as well as the name of the act. The designer of every theme puts together sample acts for you in order to demonstrate the functionality of the different theme-designed actors. So when you first start your presentation, you'll at least have a few acts to work with. There is really very little you need to do in the Presentation Acts toolbar. At the top are the only two features you need to worry about. On the left is a button to delete the selected act. If the act is in your presentation, you won't be able to delete it. We'll talk about removing acts from your presentation in a minute. To the right of the delete button is a field for naming or renaming your act. Simply click in the box and type a new name. The real functionality of acts comes in the Edit Layout Mode. If you're not in the Edit Layout Mode, click the Toggle Edit Mode button to ensure the editing window is in the Edit Layout Mode. Now watch this. If I've done my job right, and these acts are cohesive messages in an overall message, I can just drop acts into the editing window and quickly create my presentation. Cool, right? Let me show you how easy that was. First, let's just clear out the layout. Just right-click anywhere on this second act. You must have at least one act in the layout, and choose Remove Selected Act. Boom, everything's gone. Now, a couple things about this. One, everything's gone. Everything after the act I selected is gone, including the act I selected. Impression Studio is about continuity of performance, so when you delete an act, you're really deleting that act and everything after it. That's important to remember. Secondly, even though I removed the acts from the layout, they're not gone. If we look over here in the Presentation Acts toolbar, we can see that the acts are still there. I can still drag them over and recreate what I did. Now I want you to notice the arrow before the first act in the layout. I could drag to that arrow and place the act I'm dragging before the new act. Or if I drag to the end of the last act, an arrow will appear for me to drop onto. Now before we go on, I want to show you something in the settings up here in the Properties toolbar. This option, Remove Actors when Adding Acts, is selected by default. Remember that Impression Studio is about continuity. When your actors are placed on the stage, they stay on the stage until you tell them to leave. When you add a new act to your presentation, it has far-reaching ramifications for the actors already on the stage. What this setting does is let you decide whether or not you want the actors from the last scene to leave en masse. Look at the transition scenes on the acts in our presentation. Notice how there are no actors in them. When I added those acts, I didn't want the actors from the last act hanging around. Now, you might want to. If that's the case, go ahead and deselect this setting. There is a way to override this setting, but I'll talk about that in the Sequencer Toolbar tutorial. For now, I'll deselect this option so you can see what happens. I can also drag and drop an act between two acts. Notice how all the actors from the last scene of the last act are still on the stage, not like before, when they were gone. If I had the Remove Actors when Adding Acts setting selected, those actors would have been removed for me. One other thing to note about this. If I had set to have the actors removed automatically and inserted an act between two other acts, Impression Studio will still make sure the actors prior to the new act were removed, and the actors at the end of this act will be removed for the next act. Impression Studio will take care of all the details for me. Okay, one last drag and drop demo. I can drop an act onto any scene and create a branch at that scene. During my presentation, I can choose to follow this branch or stay on the main presentation. Every time you drag an act from the Presentation Acts toolbar, Impression creates a clone of that act. Any changes you make to the act, once it's in your presentation, will be made to every other clone of that act you have in your presentation, including the master act in the Presentation Acts toolbar. If you want to avoid that, you can click and hold the Control key as you drag and drop the act. Holding the Control key creates a unique copy of the act, so any changes you make to that copy won't propagate to any other instances of that act in the presentation or the master act in the Presentation Acts toolbar. The only places you can't drop an act are an instance of itself in your presentation or onto a scene that is set to autoplay, which includes the transition scenes. I talk more about scenes in the current Act toolbar tutorial. Okay, before we move on, let me point out another feature of the editing window. I've added so many acts that I can't see them all in the window. I can click on any empty spot of the editing window and drag the window around to try to see more of my presentation. If that doesn't do the trick, down in the status bar, I can use the zoom slider to zoom out of the window, then move the window around to fit my entire presentation on the screen. Okay, earlier we talked about how removing an act from the presentation removes all the acts that follow. What if I don't want that to happen? I don't want this second act, but I want everything after it. I can just move all the acts I want to keep and put them before the act I want to remove. I can now select the last act and delete it. So not only can you add acts from the Presentation Acts toolbar, but you can rearrange acts in the Edit Layout window. One last feature. Suppose none of the acts in the Presentation Acts toolbar are what I need. I need to create a new act. I can right-click on any arrow, between acts, or at the end, and choose Insert New Act. And a new single scene act will be inserted. I can double-click on the scene and be taken to the Edit Scene mode where I can build my new act. Finally, I can right-click on any scene other than transition scenes and choose Insert New Act, and a new act will be created as a branch off that scene. Acts are a sea change in presentation composition. Play around with them and see how powerful you can be when you tell your story.